programs don't just seem to have a problem with jaywalkers. Researchers like Joy Blomweeny have repeatedly found that certain groups tend to get excluded from the data that AI is trained on, putting them at a serious disadvantage.
With self-driving cars, when they tested pedestrian tracking, it was less accurate on darker-skinned individuals than lighter-skinned individuals.
Joy believes this bias is because of the lack of diversity in the data used in teaching AI to make distinctions.
As I started looking at the data sets, I learned that for some of the largest data sets that have been very consequential for the field, they were majority men and majority lighter-skinned individuals or white individuals. So I call this pale male data.
Okay, pale male data is an objectively hilarious term, and it also sounds like what an AI program would say if you asked it to describe this show. But biased inputs leading to biased outputs is a big issue across the board here. Remember that guy saying that a robot is going to read your resume? The companies that make these programs will tell you that that is actually a good thing, because it reduces human bias. But in practice, one report concluded that most hiring algorithms will drift towards bias by default, because, for instance, they might learn what a good hire is from past racist and sexist hiring decisions. And again, it can be tricky to untrain that. Even when programs are specifically told to ignore race or gender, they will find workarounds to arrive at the same result. Amazon had an experimental hiring tool that taught itself that male candidates were preferable, and penalised resumes that included the words women's and downgraded graduates of 2 all-women's colleges. Meanwhile, another company discovered that its hiring algorithm had found 2 factors to be most indicative of job performance: if an applicant's name was Jared, and whether they played high school lacrosse. So clearly, exactly what data computers are fed and what outcomes they are trained to prioritise matter tremendously, and that raises a big flag for programs like ChatGPT, because remember, its training data is the internet, which, as we all know, can be a cesspool, and we have known for a while that that could be a real problem. Back in 2016, Microsoft briefly unveiled a chatbot on Twitter named Tay. The idea was she would teach herself how to behave by chatting with young users on Twitter. Almost immediately, Microsoft pulled the plug on it, and for the exact reasons that you are thinking.
She started out tweeting about how humans are super, and she's really into the idea of National Puppy Day. And within a few hours, you can see she took on a rather offensive, racist tone, a lot of messages about genocide and the Holocaust.
Yep, that happened in less than 24 hours. Tay went from tweeting, "Hello world," to "Bush did 9/11 and Hitler was right." Meaning she completed the entire life cycle of your high school friends on Facebook in just a fraction of the time. And unfortunately, these problems have not been fully solved in this latest wave of AI. Remember that program that was generating an endless episode of Seinfeld? It wound up getting temporarily banned from Twitch after it featured a transphobic stand-up bit. So if its goal was to emulate sitcoms from the 90s, I guess mission accomplished. And while OpenAI has made adjustments and added filters to prevent ChatGPT from being misused, users have now found it seeming to err too much on the side of caution, like responding to the question, what religion will the first Jewish president of the United States be with? It is not possible to predict the religion of the first Jewish president of the United States. The focus should be on the qualifications and experience of the individual, regardless of their religion. Which really makes it sound like ChatGPT said one too many racist things at work and they made it attend a corporate diversity workshop. But the risk here isn't that these tools will somehow become unbearably woke. It's that you can't always control how they will act, even after you give them new guidance. A study found that attempts to filter out toxic speech in systems like ChatGPT's can come at the cost of reduced coverage for both texts about and dialects of marginalised groups. Essentially, it solves the problem of being racist by simply erasing minorities, which historically doesn't put it in the best company, though I am sure Tay would be completely on board with the idea. The problem with AI right now isn't that it's smart, it's that it's stupid in ways that we can't always predict, which is a real problem because we're increasingly using AI in all sorts of consequential ways, from determining whether you will get a job interview to whether you'll be pancaked by a self-driving car. And experts worry that it won't be long before programs like ChatGPT or AI-enabled deep fakes can be used to turbocharge the spread of abuse or misinformation online. And those are just the problems that we can foresee right now. The nature of unintended consequences is they can be hard to anticipate. When Instagram was launched, the first thought wasn't, this will destroy teenage girls' self-esteem. When Facebook was released, no one expected it to contribute to genocide. But both of those things fucking happened. So what now? Well, one of the biggest things we need to do is tackle that black box problem. AI systems need to be explainable, meaning that we should be able to understand exactly how and why an AI came up with its answers. Now, companies are likely to be very reluctant to open up their programs to scrutiny, but we may need to force them to do that. In fact, as this attorney explains, when it comes to hiring programs, we should have been doing that ages ago.
We don't trust companies to self-regulate when it comes to pollution. We don't trust them to self-regulate when it comes to workplace comp. Why on earth would we trust them to self-regulate AI? Look, I think a lot of the AI hiring tech on the market is illegal. I think a lot of it is biased. I think a lot of it violates existing laws. The problem is you just can't prove it. Not with the existing laws we have in the United States.
Right. We should absolutely be addressing potential bias in hiring software, unless, that is, we want companies to be entirely full of Jareds who played lacrosse. An image that would make Tucker Carlson so hard that his desk would flip right over. And for a sense of what might be possible here, it's worth looking at what the EU is currently doing. They are developing rules regarding AI that sort its potential uses from high risk to low. High-risk systems could include those that deal with employment or public services, or those that put the life and health of citizens at risk. And AI of these types would be subject to strict obligations before they could be put onto the market, including requirements related to the quality of data sets, transparency, human oversight, accuracy, and cybersecurity. And that seems like a good start toward addressing at least some of what we have discussed tonight. Look, AI clearly has tremendous potential and could do great things, but if it is anything like most technological advances over the past few centuries, unless we are very careful, it could also hurt the underprivileged, enrich the powerful, and widen the gap between them. The thing is, like any other shiny new toy, AI is ultimately a mirror, and it will reflect back exactly who we are, from the best of us to the worst of us, to the part of us that is gay and hates the bus. Or to put everything that I've said tonight much more succinctly.
Knock, knock. Who's there? ChatGPT. ChatGPT who? ChatGPT careful, you might not know how it works.
Exactly. That is our show. Thanks so much for watching. Now, please enjoy a little more of AI Eminem rapping about cats.
They're the kings of the house. They're running the show. They don't need a spouse. They're the best pets that out. Be a little friend. Eminem loves cats until the very end. They may drive us crazy with their constant meow, but we can't stay mad. This still a rock with a single purr.
I'm gay.
Four, 3, 2, 1. Boom, and we're live. 12 rules for life. So without reading this, so what you're saying is, that's what I like.
There's only 12 things you need to know in life, right? That's it?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
This interview that you just did with this woman, Kathy Newman, was that in the UK?
It was Channel 4, UK.
I just went, I felt bad, but I was also laughing. I went to her Twitter page to read, with each one of her tweets, no matter what she says, someone writes underneath it. So what you're saying is, and then some ridiculous, but by the way, your fans were mocking her, but politely, non-aggressively. I didn't read any rude things. Like there was no insults or There was, well, maybe a few insults, but there's no swears. It was just playful mocking of the interview that she did with you, because the interview was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous interview. I mean, I listened to it or watched it several times. I was like, this is so strange. It's like her determination to turn it into a conflict. It's one of the issues that I have with television shows.
Yeah.
Because they have a very limited amount of time, and they're trying to make things as salacious as possible. They want to have these sound bites, these clickbait sound bites. And she just went into it incredibly confrontational, not trying to find your actual perspective, but trying to force you to defend a non-realistic perspective.
Yes, well, I was the hypothetical villain of her imagination, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was interesting, too, the way it played itself out, because I met her in the green room beforehand. You know, she was being made up, and then they put a little bit of powder on me, and we had a friendly kind of interchange, and then we went and sat in front of the cameras and for a couple of minutes, you know, before the show got rolling, and we had a pretty pleasant back and forth, and then as soon as the cameras went on, she was a completely different person. And I thought, oh, I see. I see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so that kind of alerted me to, well, the fact that there was something rotten in the state of Denmark, let's say. Yeah, but, you know, this is also why YouTube is going to kill TV. Because television, by its nature, all of these narrow broadcast technologies, they rely on forcing the story, right? Because it has to happen now. It has to happen often in 5 minutes, because they only broadcast 5 minutes of that interview. They did put the whole thing up on YouTube.
To their credit.
It hasn't ceased to amaze me yet. I think that they thought that the interview went fine. That's the scuttlebutt I've got from sort of behind the scenes, because I know some people who know what's going on at Channel 4, and they're shell-shocked by the response. You know, and then, of course, there was the counter-response. The Guardian the next day published an article saying that, you know, the head of Channel 4 had to call in police security because of threats. You know, well, first of all, you can call the police in about anything, and they never did detail out exactly what the threats were. You know, but then about 20 newspapers picked that up and went for well, Kathy Newman is now being harassed by an army of online trolls for doing nothing but doing her job, which, well, and then there was a backlash against that in the press. And so it's been what do you say
someone
about
took
that?
an audit of the actual interchanges that between fans and her, and there was way more negative ones coming your way.
Yes, that were seriously negative. Yeah, that's right.
Seriously negative, violent, harassing, just rude. There were way more.
Yeah.
And no one picked up on that at all. It was all, the narrative was she's a victim, even though she was highly aggressive in this. But
she's a funny victim. It's not like she's not successful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like at some point you think you should have to hand in your victim card. I think like when you go to an Ivy League university, it's like right then and there. You get to hand in. Yeah, because you don't get to be oppressor and oppressed at the same time. That's just too much.
Well, one of the things that you pointed out was when you were talking about competition for very lucrative jobs, and you were saying, look what you've done. Like, you must have had to work here. And she proudly was saying how hard she had to work to get there. I'm like, well, yes, of course. No one's going to hand this to you.
No,
this
definitely
is why,
not.
And this is why you were saying you are opposed to equality of outcome.
Equality of outcome. I can't imagine anything we could possibly strive for in our society that would make it into hell faster than equality of outcome. Like the historical evidence for the pathology of that route is so strong. It's like you have to be historically ignorant beyond belief, or malevolent, or resentful beyond comprehension in order to think that that's a good idea. To argue for that.
I agree with you, but I think that even if you came into this with no knowledge of history, but a complete understanding of human beings, you would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. And one of the best quotes that I've ever read about it is that if you have real, true freedom, you're never going to have equality of outcome. Because with real, true freedom, you have the freedom to not engage. Well, look, if you look at a guy like Jeff Bezos, for instance, that Amazon guy is worth more money than anybody ever, right? That guy works all day.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a maniac.
Oh, yeah.
He's acquiring all these different companies, and everything he's doing is designed to succeed. Yeah. I mean, he's just
well, that's what Gates just said,
yes.
too, in a recent interview. And I know some guys that are, they're in approximately the same universe as those two, and they just work All the time.
That's all they do.
All the time.
Yeah.
And they don't just work. They work so efficiently and so effectively and make use of every second in ways you can't even imagine unless you're in that sort of position. So, and you know, doing that doesn't mean that you will succeed, but not doing it certainly means that you will fail.
Well, not doing it certainly means you will never achieve that level of success, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about equality of outcome.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to work like that. I don't want to do what he's doing, and I should have the freedom to not do that.
Yeah.
As he should have the freedom to do that. If we're going to play this game called capitalism, which we're all agreeing is probably, at least in as far as the models that we have right now, is the best one that we have. If we're all going to play this game, if someone decides to be the Michael Jordan of capitalism, you can't stop them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, no, you're playing this game too well. You're playing this game too hard. You're too obsessed with this game. You're going to have that.
Yeah, you can stop them. You can try to stop people from winning crookedly,
Yes.
which is what you should do. And,
Yes.
you know, there's a couple of things that are really worth delving into with regards to that, too, because there's this sort of Marxist notion that all this inequality is generated as a consequence of capitalism. And that's actually technically false. Because if you look at, there seems to be something like a law of nature that's described by this statistical model called the Pareto distribution. And it basically suggests that in any creative domain, there's going to be a small number of people will do almost all of the output. But it doesn't just apply to human beings. It applies to the heights of trees in the Amazon rainforest. It applies to the size of cities, and it applies to the mass of stars, and it's something like the more you have, the more you get. It's something like, you can imagine how that would work with a star. As it gets bigger and bigger and its gravitational mass increases, it's going to attract more and more matter. And then as a city grows, well, more and more people are excited to move there because of all the opportunities. And so some cities start to grow tremendously and others don't. But this phenomena where a small number of people end up controlling a tremendous proportion of the resource is not only limited to money, and it doesn't only occur in capitalist societies. It occurs everywhere. It's like a natural law. So you see the same thing with number of points scored by a spectacular sports figure. There's always a tiny proportion of people who are way ahead on the curve, or people who make records, or people who sell paintings, or people who compose music, or people who sell music online. It's all the same. It's the 1% gets 80%. And so, well, first, we can't blame that on capitalism. And second, we should note that it actually does constitute a problem, which is what the left-wingers are always jumping up and down about, right? Like, too much inequality starts to destabilize your society. And it isn't obvious how to shovel money from the top end, maybe the 1/10 of 1% who have almost all the money, down to the people who have almost nothing in a way that's effective, so that they don't get thrown out of the game completely and so that the whole society doesn't destabilize. We don't exactly know how to do that. It is a problem because inequality does exist and it does tend to magnify across time. And then there's another problem too, which we haven't figured out, is imagine that in order to make everyone rich, you have to tolerate a certain amount of inequality. It seems obvious. We don't know how many units of inequality you need to tolerate per unit of wealth generated. But the answer is definitely not zero. It's definitely not zero. So
it goes back to this equality of outcome idea.
Yeah.
And this thing has perplexed me since I've met you and since you